Hello, first grade. It's Miss Murphy. We are going to be reading a story today called Grace for President. As we know, this week is election week for our country as well as our school. So, we're going to be learning all about that and reading fiction books about the election process. So, this book called Grace for President is written by Kelly DiPuccio. And I notice on the cover that here's Grace right here and all of her friends. What else do you notice? Where do you think they might be? How do you think she feels? What are some other things you notice on the cover of the story? So this is a fiction story. It's made up, but it's realistic, right? It's a realistic fiction story. So that means there might be some true information, but it's still a made up story. So here I see a few of our past presidents, Barack Obama here, and then we have a picture of our main character, Grace, as well. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all the president's pictures on it, and Grace could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That's a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman as a president. No girl president ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and thought, no girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? And finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace. I've been thinking it over, and I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Why would they laugh? Let's think about that and answer that question. Why would the students in the class laugh? I wonder if Grace can actually pull it off. Will she really try and be president? While I'm reading, I'm thinking about the story and I'm asking questions as well as answering some questions that I've been telling you. Well, I think that's a great idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The laughing in the room stopped and Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Miss Barrington asked the class, and nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of the democracy, I have invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election, and their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school's spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all. So they have two classes with one presidential person in each. In Miss Barrington's class, Grace is running for president. And in the other class, Mr. Waller, Thomas is running for president. And it might be a tough competition. Remember, there hasn't been a girl president. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 16 mean? Each state is assigned a number of votes, and that number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be the representative for your state. Altogether, our country has 538 votes, Mr. Waller explained, and on election day, the candidate who receives 270 votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of all the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be easy. And that's really how it works. We vote for our president as well. If you are over the age of 18 years old, you can vote for the president. And each state has a certain number of representatives that represent their state. Just like in our class, we're going to have a first grade representative to represent our grade. Grace came up with a campaign slogan, "Make history, vote Grace Campbell for president." Thomas came up with his own slogan, "Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job." Grace listened to what issues were important to the students, and she made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school, no bullies. A cleaner school, no littering. Better hot lunches, no more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer, fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons, but Thomas made posters and buttons too. Who would you vote for? I wonder who likes Grace more and who likes Thomas more for the job. Every week, the teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet. Polls were taken, voters were making their choices. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes, and after school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried at all. He clearly calculated the boys held slightly more votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment, and after school, he played soccer. So Thomas is not very confident. I wonder if that's going to come back to bite him later, because Grace is over here working extra hard to get all of her votes, and Thomas doesn't really care. Is that who you would want to vote for? Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad. She organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly, and Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellowhammer State of Alabama casts its 9 votes for Thomas Cobb, Fletcher said. The state of Alaska casts its 3 votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. Hannah called out. The Grand Canyon cast its 11 votes for Grace Campbell, and so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes, and the scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of the totals. The voting was quickly coming to an end, and Clara approached the podium. Wisconsin cast its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes, and she had 267. There was only one state left to go. Wyoming. So Grace was just 1 behind. And remember, they have to get 270 votes or more to win. Thomas grinned and Grace felt sick. Why would Thomas be smiling and Grace felt sick? Maybe because they thought the last vote was going to go to Thomas. He looked at Thomas, he looked at Grace, he looked down at Grace's handmade flag, and Sam didn't say a word. What are you waiting for? Thomas whispered, and the band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming, and finally Sam cleared his throat. The Equality State of Wyoming casts its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in cheers and a few boos. Miss Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. "Because," he said, "I thought you were the best person for the job." So even though this friend, everyone thought he was going to vote for the other boy, Thomas, he thought Grace was the best for the job. Why do you think he thought Grace was the best for the job? The following week, students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations, and Grace volunteered to go first. She stood in front of the room and looked at the poster still hanging on the wall. "My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be the President of the United States." And this time, everyone believed that she would. And then here she is. It flashes forward to the future. And the end. And at the end, it explains a little bit about how the voting system works. We're not going to read that, but you kind of saw how it works in the story. So go ahead and think about some questions you still have about the story. What do you wonder? And what did you learn from the story? It's good to keep those things in mind. Thanks for listening.